need one to get out.
Good morning.
I'll take
Good
a
morning.
picture of it.
Good morning. Good. Keep it down. Thank you. I'm Mike Russell. I'm the chairman of the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce.
Can I have one?
I'm proud to have the chamber join our elected officials and citizen groups as they work to stop the I-77 toll project. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to State Senator Jeff Tarte.
All right, to keep this kind of on track, what I'm going to do is read, so we're all on the same page, the letter that we have sent to the governor's office earlier this morning. And then what we'll do is if there's any of the others, the General Assembly members that want to add a quick comment, we'll do so. But really what I want to do is open this up to the media and let it really be your meeting to ask the questions that you might have about this project as it goes forward. This is a 2.5-page document. Letter, so bear with me if you will, please, and I'll try to read. And then there's copies available for each of you as well. Okay, it's dated today's date. It was sent at 4:30 this morning, and it says, "We, the undersigned members of the North Carolina General Assembly, residing in proximity to the planned tolling of Interstate 77, respectfully request that under your authority as governor of the state of North Carolina, you immediately exercise the termination provisions for cause of the contract between the North Carolina Department of Transportation and Centra I-77 Mobility Partners." They'll be referred to as Centra throughout the document. A combination of several important facts have come to light since the contract was signed that we believe materially breached the intent, desire, and long-term expectations to move forward with this managed lanes project. The facts that necessitate the project be immediately canceled are as follows. First and most importantly, the additional managed interstate highway lanes will be built below standards that will ever accommodate truck and heavy vehicle travel. The base of the managed lanes will be approximately half the required depth required to enable trucks to use these lanes. In order to have these interstate highway lanes able to facilitate truck traffic at any time after the managed lanes are built, these lanes would have to be ground to the base and completely rebuilt from scratch. This would render the over $650 million of taxpayer and equity partner investment a significant waste of money. We believe this is fiscally irresponsible. Second, the total liability to North Carolina taxpayers has changed from what we originally communicated by NCDOT. It was originally our understanding that if Centra filed for and utilized provisions under bankruptcy, NC taxpayers' maximum liability would not exceed $158 million. New information suggests that Centra can technically, and in quotes, default rather than file for bankruptcy, which would shift the entire outstanding debt associated with this project to the state of North Carolina. We believe this is fiscally irresponsible. Next, local businesses believe that the managed lanes systematically give an advantage to certain businesses and selectively put other businesses at risk of failure. This adverse environment is created by the design that provides no ingress or egress points to access businesses at selected exits. Once the managed lanes are implemented, travelers using the toll lanes will not be able to access restaurants, gas stations, and hotels at multiple exits on I-77. This is not sustainable for small business owners. Severe congestion occurs on I-77 6 days and sometimes 7 days a week, starting around 6:30 a.m. and running off into 7 p.m. or later. It's been confirmed that the contracted managed lanes provide minimal relief to this severe congestion. Many small business owners find that what was once a 10 or 20-minute trip getting customers to their stores, as well as sending employees to customers' homes and businesses to provide their service or deliver products, now can easily take over 60 minutes to 90 minutes. In some cases, employees' commutes to work have quadrupled. Without a solution to fixing severe congestion, businesses are losing customers and employees. This is not sustainable for small business owners. Last, when the managed lanes were supported by elected leaders of the region, they were told that there was no debt capacity within the state and there would be no funds available to widen I-77 for the next 25 years. The premise was that the Lake Norman region must accept managed lanes or see nothing done with I-77 in this transportation corridor for 25 years. The NCGA and your office have implemented major tax reform and a solution that eliminated a $2.8 billion unemployment benefit insurance debt to the federal government. Over the past 3 years, these policy changes by the NCGA and your office have eliminated a $2 billion state budget deficit, resulting in a $400 million surplus. State Budget Director Lee Roberts publicly announced that the state now has debt capacity to borrow monies to build roads. We support the 1990 NC DOT report that calls for the widening of I-77 with 8 total general purpose lanes from Statesville to the South Carolina border. It's time to cancel the managed lanes project with Centra. Let me repeat that again. It is time to cancel the managed lanes project with Centra. As demonstrated by results of the recent local elections, the businesses and citizens of the region do not support the managed lanes project. We recognize that the I-77 managed lanes project has never been scored in the strategic transportation investments model. This project was identified before the STI became North Carolina law. We ask that this managed lanes project be redefined into multiple projects. We also request that the Lake Norman section of the contract be redefined as its own project using general purpose lanes. It is important that this new project be expeditiously submitted for calculation and ranking through the STI model. Given the information that's come to light, it is the opinion of the undersigned that our communities and businesses will suffer irreparable harm if the Centra contract is not terminated. Armed with this new information, we respectfully request that you exercise your authority as governor to immediately cancel the contract. It's signed by myself, Senator Curtis, Representative Bradford, and Representative Jeter. As I was struggling how to proceed with this, I've got multiple versions of next comments. And rather than do that, I just want to share one other action item as a result of Centra and NCDOT's moving forward with the announcement they're going to begin construction this Monday. This group of 4 legislators has engaged legal counsel as far as to discuss, both in Raleigh and locally, pursuing and having a temporary restraining order put against NCDOT and Centra to immedially cease and desist any further construction activity. So with that, I don't know if any of David, if you have a comment or two you'd like to add, and then we'll open it up for questions to any of the 4 members of the General Assembly.
First, I'd like to thank Senator Tarte for all his hard work on this issue. We feel like that there's enough issues with the contract that when it goes to court, we feel like the state of North Carolina will have a very valid case to justify terminating this contract. So we think that we'll be successful in litigation on this. So now let's open up for questions for us.
And the one comment I'll make before, and we'll try to keep this fairly casual but somewhat controlled, is if you'll direct the questions to me and then or let us know who you would like to answer the questions, specifically only the NCGA members. But I do want to recognize all the electeds that are standing with us that support the position that we've taken on this particular project. So, Jim?
Senator, are you talked about going to court. Are you going, lawyers going to court today or when?
To be determined, but we are pursuing what are the right steps and process to secure the TRO.
But you need it before Monday, though.
Not necessarily, but it would be nice to have it by Monday. Save them some gas and mileage.
Not that I see. I don't see anybody.
David, we are trying to pursue that as we speak. We have resources looking into it.
And who is your counsel?
Let's wait and see, because we have people we're talking to both local and in Raleigh.
Can you just explain what you're trying, where you are in that process and what you're trying to do?
Yes, as first step was actually, we've been working on this for about 3 weeks, pulling this together. It's, as you've seen, we've also had conversations for Representative Jeter. He can answer any other questions with the governor as far as bringing the electeds together so we can talk about how we proceed, what are the options and issues and implications of canceling the contract. That it creates a starting position from our perspective. And then because of the actions taken by Centra, we believe there's potentially provisions in the contract they have to fulfill in order to be able to start construction, and we need to ensure that's been done properly. And because this is a last-minute effort, because they had announced, some time ago that this construction could not begin until spring, and then they came back just a few months ago and announced they're running behind, it would be summer. And then with our activity, all of a sudden they can start tomorrow. So we're sort of in the same case. We believe we can react pretty quickly to that initiative.
Senator, what about, have you talked to the governor throughout this process? What have you heard today? What's kind of the process for going forward with the governor?
Eric, great question. I specifically, and I don't know, and I'll let the other members speak, I have not talked to the governor directly, but I've been talking indirectly through some of the staff. Charlie, I think, has had direct communications with the governor.
Governor and I have become quick pen pals. We text like 12-year-old girls now. Up until 10 o'clock this morning, the governor and I have spoken numerous times over the last week. I don't know how much we'll speak after 10 o'clock this morning. We are not, I think it's imperative for everyone to understand, we're not trying to put the governor in a box or make any threats or any of that. We're trying to help the governor understand what we've come to understand. And my conversations with the governor, which I will leave the specificity of it confidential, but have been of someone who has deep concerns, someone who's willing to listen, and we plan on, we still plan on going forward with the summit, as he and I spoke about and he and I have committed to do. We're trying to nail down that date. I know it's frustrating because we don't have a date, but
So he'll be there.
My comment, I've learned in politics lately, don't make promises unless you're 100% sure. I will be there. I've asked the governor to be there, and he's given me every indication he will.
So what is the tone of the conversation? How frustrated is he by this continued back and forth on the project?
Well, I think the governor shares frustration like I think we all share up here. I mean, there's frustration on both sides of this equation. You've got community leaders, some who are sitting in this room who I have the utmost respect for, who are looking at me with disappointment in their eyes. You have leaders that I've been a long-time ally of who probably aren't thrilled with, particularly me. And so we've got to get past hurt feelings. And we've got to get past trying to everybody sing kumbaya and do all those things. It would be great if we could come together and get a solution that works. Without that being possible, that doesn't mean you don't move forward and find a solution that works, even if we can't sing kumbaya. And so I think that's the position. We're in a parallel path. We certainly hope the governor and his folks, and we've had numerous conversations with me personally. I think I'm probably the only one who's spoken to him and his staff recently and numerous times. I will say this, he's listening. I'm not here to prepare to tell you that I know what his next steps will be. All I can tell you is he and I have had very candid conversations, and I think they've been very fruitful.
Has he been flexible on what he seemed to be pretty adamant this summer when he said, too late, can't cancel the contract? Has he given any indication that he's bending on that?
The governor has never given me an indication. He hasn't told me to pound sand yet. So, I don't know how flexible he is. Time will tell. But we've got a short window here. I mean, I'm not one who believes in conspiracy theories and men in shadows. Never have been. I tend to believe that when you say men in shadows, there's nothing but shadows there. But come on. They announced yesterday they're going to move dirt tomorrow, Monday. That's a little rich. And that's why we've asked for the TRO. We're pursuing that path. We want to make sure that we do what's right for our community. And certainly we're going to do everything we can to protect our community. We hope the governor hops on board and does it with us. I'm cautiously optimistic he will.
So let's say you're able to stop them, get this halted. What is realistically possible in terms of getting state funding to expand septic?
Keep in mind that what this group is asking is to be a part of the STI program. In 2013, the state legislature, of which Senator Tarte and Senator Curtis and I were members of, eliminated every road earmark in the state that was not bonded or contracted. That left 3 projects: the Monroe Bypass, a section of 540 in Raleigh, and this project, which was authorized, I point out, the toll project was authorized by House Bill 1077 in 2012. Senator Tarte, Senator Tarte, and myself would like to remind you we weren't there and didn't vote on it. Everybody get that? You know, so from that perspective, we're not asking for another earmark. Earmarks in this state for road projects are done, and they should be done. Because the truth of the matter is, had we not done earmarks in this state for the 20 years, based on where Mark Bassnight or Tony Rand lived, we wouldn't have this problem. So what we did in 2013 is we went on a data analysis, and I give Speaker Tillis in particular a great deal of credit for changing the way we build road funding in the state and making it so we do have more options. And he deserves a lot of credit for that. And so from that perspective, you know, the other thing that we've got to talk about here is, and Senator Tarte kind of alluded to it, is we changed, in 2015, we eliminated the highway fund transfer. That was $216 million a year that should have gone to roads. It was going to other places in the general fund. That no longer happens as of July 1st, 2015. That's an extra $250 million every year in road funding. We did increase fees, which I know nobody likes to admit, but I'll admit it, we increased fees, which creates another $275 million in road funding. We increased road funding in this state in 2015 by over $400 million a year. We are not, so, you know, we talk about the things that have changed, and there's been a lot that's changed. We know we were under the gun. We didn't have some revenues. There's a lot of things that are different in 2015 and 2012, and it's incumbent upon us as leaders in our community to do 2 things. Listen when our residents speak, and adjust when the facts change. And I believe the 4 of us that are up here that have signed this letter, and our colleagues around this group with us, that's why we're here, that's why we're adamant, and that's why we're asking for a change.
But keep in mind, and just so we emphasize the point, because there's been a lot of discussion that we want to be added to a bond package, we want to jump over everybody else, we want to circumvent the STI, and nothing could be farther from the truth. What we ask is the project be properly defined, particularly because we are at ground zero of congestion. Ultimately, the only thing this is about is solving congestion so the residents can function and the businesses can continue to thrive in the region. And to do that, we need the project redefined to the section where that congestion and that rerun in the STI. If we call 378 and it's 20 years, so be it. I don't think that'll happen. But if we move up, then we need to be appropriated and funded based on our ranking.
So when we're talking a lot about businesses suffering because of the toll lanes and the way that's configured, at the same time, if you wait 10 or 20 years, they're suffering in another way. So I guess what I'm asking you is, what's a realistic, I know you can't say,
Sure,
you know, February 2017, but what's a realistic amount of time that something would have to happen on the state side, assuming you're able to kill
Well, I could, because I kind of disagree with the supposition of the question, as much as I love you, Eric Stemmer.
well, that's not what you said earlier.
True, but at that point he didn't have a pen and paper. We have to understand that there's one thing for short-term pain, and there's another thing for generational pain. And if you look at the ingress and egress points on this project, we're talking about pain that could really affect and have a dramatic negative impact on this community and take billions of dollars in economic funding out of this community, versus the status quo, which none of us believe the status quo is the right path. What we're saying is we trust the
My arm's
STI
getting
system.
tired.
And all we're asking is to have a fair shake in STI, no different, no better, no less than any other road project considered by the CRTPO. And we firmly believe, speculation I admit, that if you go out there and base it on data, I mean, so y'all stay here till 4 o'clock and try to drive home. And if y'all tell me that this project's not gonna rank, then, you know, I believe the STI is going to rank this project high enough. I don't have any information to back that up because the reality is it's speculative in nature. But we believe STI is based on data. We believe the data will show this road is qualified for general purpose fundings sooner rather than later.
So what's the timetable?
One thing to recognize, and see, I will come back, didn't mean to interrupt. one thing to recognize, yeah, we're trying to fight for our local residents and businesses, but this has got regional implications. If you look at I-77, it's one of two north-south transportation corridors through this whole area, I-95 and this. We have to be thinking about commerce throughout the region. And if you've got, and we're hopefully not going into this naive, recognizing the issues that are going to surround the difficulty and complexity of canceling the contract. Not just the contract itself, but there's tangential issues, things around air quality attainment. But it sure makes a lot of sense that just having a few cars run fast versus having 18-wheelers sit and stop and go traffic for hours every day cannot help. Enabling them to free flow has got to be an advantage. Those things we're trying to work through as well.
Steve, going to your question about timetable?
And I do have a follow.
Oh, listen, I'll be here all day. I don't start at the Comedy Zone until 7:30. So we want it to be part of P4, 4.0, which is the next STI ranking program. That's what we're specifically asking for, to be ranked as part of P4 4.0. And then that time frame, which will ultimately, that STI ranking bucket will be approved sometime in 2017, and then to go from there.
When I meant timetable, I was talking about court action, meeting with the governor, those kinds of things.
As far as the court action, the TRO is something that we've discussed last night, this morning, and we will pursue, as Senator Tarte said. We've got folks in Raleigh and folks here locally looking at how to file the TRO to make sure we handle that appropriately. As far as the conversations with the governor, you know, we still expect the summit to go on within the 10 business days that we talked about. We're still trying to confirm that date. We will do it one way or the other. We still hope that NC DOT and the governor will come join us and participate, and we can have an honest, fair exchange of ideas and see what resolutions exist.
And the follow-up is this: considering that you may have consensus, do you think that the other legislators, the other counties, would bail out the great state of Mecklenburg to the tune of $100 million?
Well, let me put it to you this way. Everybody uses the $100 million thing, and I want to argue that point again because, A, we don't know what the number is, because the contract can be canceled for convenience or cause. We believe, a lot of us believe, some more strongly than others admittedly, that you can believe that you could cancel this for cause. There's a young lady here in town named Diane Gilroy who's done an incredible piece about why we think it could be canceled for cause. But even if you cancel it for convenience, you know, we've gone to the NCGA attorneys. There's no definitive $100 million. I know we like to throw that out. But let me walk you down a little path, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but let me walk you down a little path. Even if the fee was $100 million, there's $77 million that the state is supposed to put in this project for 2 interchanges that will only be built if we do the managed lane project. That money goes away and stays in state coffers. There's another $75 million in what I call revenue sweetener that the state is kicking in over a period of 5 years to Centra. So that's $152 million the state is putting out of our funding model to another company for something that we would not use or spend if we don't do this. I can argue that even at $100 million, we actually saved the state $52 million by canceling the contract. And those aren't made up numbers. That's contractual numbers. Those are well-defined, well-notated. And I think we have to, you know, I honestly don't think it's $100 million either. We're talking about what's the fair market value. So I know people like to use that number. I've used it in the past. But we have to look at not only what it costs, but what do we save to have a true analysis.
Steve, one add-on to that is we've got 2 of our chamber chairs, Mike Russell, John Hetler, working with some of the business leaders, have gone through a detailed financial analysis and have done the ROI business analysis value proposition that supports Charlie's statement. The other thing, I'm going to share a tidbit what he alluded to, was I sent in a request several weeks ago to his staff, legal counsel and fiscal research staff, and I said I'd like to know, you apply common, what you think are reasonable assumptions, take a look at the contract, calculate for me what you think the lowest possible penalty would be to terminate, give me the possible highest. They spent about 2 weeks, came back, and said they've been practicing law for 35 years. It's the most complicated and convoluted contract that's ever been written that he's ever seen. He said, to his knowledge, there is no way anybody could calculate a termination fee, and the only way you'll ever know is to arbitrate or litigate.
That was the General Assembly?
That was staff.
I mean,
yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Senator,
Jim?
you all have suggested that you're not trying to put the governor on the hot seat. It appears that's exactly what you're trying to do, or that's exactly what you're doing.
we're trying to encourage the governor to stand with us to correct what we think is wrong for our community.
It sounds like you're asking him to make the decision. Is there not a legislative remedy?
We believe, and I mean, look, is there a legislative remedy? You can always defund the project financially through the legislature. This is a signed contract that was approved in 2012 by the legislature in House Bill 1077. Did I mention that we weren't in the General Assembly when that was signed? So this is a bill that was signed. Once that bill is signed under North Carolina statutes, it then goes to the executive branch to execute. It's the term. So that contract was signed and executed by the NCDOT. The outs in the contract are by NCDOT, which is in essence the executive branch, the governor's office. So we believe that the governor, and more apt, the NCDOT, which we put as an extension of the governor, is the best and perhaps the only remedy. Now, if the governor is unwilling to do that, we are looking at what legislative options may exist. The simple, cleanest, and easiest legal solution is through action by the governor, because there's no question the contract allows NCDOT to cancel the contract for two different reasons.
And to elaborate on that point, I stood in this very room probably 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago. A lot of the media here covering, interestingly, didn't report this, but stated, and I'll state it again for everybody's edification, that at that time, if I was Governor Pat McCrory, no way, shape, or form would I step in and intervene and stop the project at that point in time. The reason being because there is a natural process that this type of project should run through, a vetting, determination of issues surrounding it. So I said, no, it wasn't the appropriate time. But as we said in the letter and pointing out, there's new information. And that's the service you guys do to the public, even to us in this case, and that is the design for the additional managed lanes that are going to be where a typical interstate is approximately 32, 34 inches. It's planned to be built at 17 inches. We now have a definitive timeline. As they start that work, it makes no sense to build what I term putting in sidewalks next to the interstate. That would determine that, if, again, as we read, if you're building lanes under half the depth, they will never be able to handle truck traffic. Even if we decide to flip this 15 years down the road, why would you do that? Because we would never have the option to put trucks on an interstate. Really makes no sense. With that change, we're trying to bring this information because the governor may not be aware of it.
I hope they report all
Is there any
this.
middle ground from the governor for you on this, or is this all or nothing, cancel it, or you're unsatisfied?
Only comment I would say to that, I think that's what we will determine as we sit down through the summits to see are there alternatives in between. Anywhere from, I think canceling may be the only option in terms of this contract. One of the things may be if we flip it to general purpose, there may be.
I'm going to flip the camera around so you can see behind me.
Make it a viable project for community again, negate any penalties. Who knows until we get that around the table together.
Charlie, off of Jim's point, I mean, it does seem painfully obvious that the governor's being put in a bad spot, or you're putting it in a. So I have to believe he would have mentioned that over the course of your conversations. What did he say about
My job is not to protect the governor. My job is to protect the residents of District 19.
Yeah, I think it's available for replay for 24 hours.
What is his frustration level with the political aspect of this as he heads into a re-election year?
I think it's only going to get greater if his action is nothing. I mean, you know, look. I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room. You know, Jim Buckets. He's going to be my opening act for that conference. Going down 7:30. We got 2 shows. We'll start the second one at 10. You know, look, I think that we want the governor to join us in this fight. We welcome him with open arms. Make no mistake, if he chooses a different path, then we'll probably remind him that we still believe this is the right course of action. I know that he is frustrated. I know that, you know, we talked about some of the old talking points that we've heard around from both sides of this issue. I remain cautiously optimistic that the governor's going to come to the table with a viable solution that works for everybody. I have faith in my governor.
Jim?
There seemed to be very little support for canceling this in the General Assembly last year, despite a few tries. Is there any reason that you believe that's changed?
Yes.
I mean, the entire delegation's not here. Do you have any commitments from from Berger or Moore?
I'll let him speak to Senator Berger. I'll speak to Representative Moore, Speaker Moore. The response from our colleagues has been overwhelming in support of myself, John Bradford, and I'm sure it has for Senator Tarte, Senator Curtis as well from their colleagues. I believe that you will see a significant, in fact, there will be some announcements from a legislative perspective coming up as soon as this afternoon, if not on Monday, on some things we're going to do on the House side as far as setting up a select committee on this issue alone that will meet sometime soon in December in efforts to further the conversation.
John, you want to?
John Bradford.
Yeah, I've been patient because I am the freshman of the group here. I will tell you, Jim, this session, there was an attempt, both on the Senate and the House, to try to address this, and I learned that you cannot take a bond. And what I tried to do was take the bond package, which at the time had a transportation component, and shift some of those funds over to terminate the contract with Centra and install general purpose lanes in the most congested areas of our corridor, which was really from about mile marker 20 up to 36. And you can't use bond money to pay termination penalties, so it was ruled out of order. But I will tell you that exercise afterwards, despite it being sort of shut down quickly on the floor, the number of people in the House that came over to say, I was with you, I would have voted for that. I think there's a lot more support there than even we might really know. And one thing we have not talked about, we talked about is this perhaps trying to put the governor on the hot seat, and I don't view it that way at all. In fact, most of my interaction up there in Raleigh this year has really, you try to go through the governor's office, but let's face it, he's the executive branch, he's a very busy man. So he has a key cabinet around him. Secretary Tata, former Secretary Tata, was really the one that we were pushed to work through. And former Secretary Tata, he minced no words on this project. He consistently, and we had meetings with him, and sometimes I would just scratch my head and say, do you work for me or do I work for you? Because at the end of the day, the message was from Secretary Tata, you've got this project because your local electeds wanted it. And that was a closed door. Now you look behind me, we've got a lot of elected officials here from the local municipalities. The reality is, the rules of this game have changed because so much more information has come to light back when this was sort of sold at the local level. Debt capacity being one of them. Jim Puckett used a line, and I hope you don't mind me quoting, but it was something like, if you put someone on death row, and then you find out that the DNA clears them, do you still execute them? And the answer is no. And we think that there's plenty of new data here that really cause us to take pause, cancel this. And this is really a two-step thing. Canceling does not solve our congestion, folks. There's no one up here that says cancel and let's go home. This is a two-step process. We have to cancel, and then we have to step back and reevaluate how do we find a funding mechanism to solve our congestion problem. It's a local road for many of us, but it's also a road for people to get to and from Charlotte for work. So we have two things to do. We need to cancel it, and then we have to go find the money. And under the STI, which again, it's important to note that the STI was still becoming law when this project was being talked about, which I think is problematic. But if you take the position that the STI, and I'll play along with this, the STI is to take away earmarks, I get that. But if we're going to say that, let's really evaluate the project, the problem of the project. The problem of the project is not 27 miles. The problem of the project is the corridor where it's jammed every single morning and every single evening before the 4 lanes shorten 2. That's the problem. So if we're going to put this thing through STI, we're just respectfully requesting that we crank it through the STI machine, looking at the area of congestion. When you do that, I would be shocked that this thing doesn't rank out in some reasonable time frame. And if it doesn't, one's got to go back and say, what's the formula? Because I want to know. So anyway, that's my answer.
So now you know why I voted for John Bradford for the House of Representatives.
I have a question. You cancel the contract, right?
I'm sorry?
Let's say
Yes,
the contract is canceled.
Yes.
Are tolls, would a toll or managed lane approach be a possibility with this contract being canceled as an alternative? Let's say, are tolls totally out of the question?
Well, I don't speak for everyone else. I can assure you that we're looking at GP lane. That's what we need.
How do you deal with the concept that when you build roads in 5 years, they're absolutely full beyond capacity? How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, you could go look over at 85 and make that argument, but that traffic's flowing. And I mean, I guess there's more general purpose lanes across America than there are tolls. So we're not alone in that problem. But you know, at the end of the day, I still would submit to you that we should try general purpose. We're using a majority of our real estate for tolls. I mean, let's use a majority of our real estate for general purpose lane, and then figure out in the future, wherever that may be, if there's a problem, what alternatives are. I don't want to do it backwards.
Jeff, you guys talked about having a lot of support among your colleagues. I talked to Bob Rucho this week and Bill Brawley. Both are not here, and they're both on the opposite side of this. If you don't even have a united delegation from Mecklenburg, how would you expect to have the appetite in the legislature to move anything through?
Well, for the legislature, first of all, it's a timing issue. We won't even convene until the end of April, so that's the reason why we need the action of the governor. But realize the most single important number in the state of North Carolina from a legal perspective, passing laws, is 87. That's the most important number there is. Because if there's 50 senators and 120 representatives, it takes half plus one in each chamber.
Yes, it is.
So you don't need everybody, but you still need the majority. So I'm comfortable that if we have a compelling case, which is one of the questions earlier, what's come to attention, and I think has changed a lot of people's perspective, is the work that we talked about from the I-77 business partners. And we talked about the House members. Complete unanimity of not stopping this. These guys put together a business case and walk through the issues from a business perspective and people's changing position and recognizing what we're really facing. So that education is part of what has to go on.
I'll say on the House side, I was excited to learn how much influence I had earlier this week. I was saddened to find out what my new office is going to look like. For those of y'all who follow me on Facebook. I hope neither is true.
Or the Herald Weekly.
Or the Herald Weekly, that's true. So,
give you guys a nod.
My wife's thrilled. So, yeah, and that's part of it. I make light of it now, but I make part of it. But, you know, look, we've got to change the hearts and minds of our colleagues in Raleigh, in the House and the Senate. Jeff's responsibility and Senator First's responsibility is to focus on the lower chamber, which we all know is the Senate. And John Bradford and I will continue to focus on the upper chamber. And, I will tell you that I've had numerous conversations with the Rules Chairman, with the Speaker of the House, with the House Majority Leader. I've had numerous conversations with Representative Brawley, everybody from Steve Ross to Paul Tyne to Chuck McGrady to Phil Shepard. I've run the gamut statewide. There is a upswell in, I think, both of our caucuses that they want to see a resolution. And as we continue to educate them on the issues, we continue to get more allies and less foes.
And make no mistake, I mean, what we think there's a business case that justifies to change of direction, but there's still politics involved, and we know we need to navigate that as well.
Okay. What is the latest schedule?
I think that philosophically across the state, there's a lot of opposition to toll roads. And so the concern is that if this goes through, it will set a precedent for the rest of the state. So we feel like we can get support in the Senate just based on that fact.
What is the latest schedule on your summit? And at this point, given what you're doing today, what's the point of the summit?
Well, I think can I answer this backwards? I think the summit's still important. Because to some degree, I think Dave Yoakum's question was incredibly astute, which somewhat surprised me.
There you go.
A compliment is small.
I love it. You know, what we're trying to do is have an honest conversation with the elected officials and the CRTPO members and the governor's office about what, not only why we think it should be canceled, but what are the ramifications? What are the unintended ramifications of canceling the contract? And then if you cancel the contract, what are the resolutions and solutions? And I think that I've never run into a situation in business or politics where getting more information by the decision makers, getting them together, getting in a room and all combining their heads, came up with a worse solution. And so I still firmly believe that the summit needs to take place. I will tell you this, we will hold this summit. And we will continue to have it with the people, everyone who's on that invitation list, who have all been notified, contrary to what you read on Facebook. We will have it. We expect NCDOT there. We hope the governor will will still attend. If they opt out, then that's their choice. We want to give them an olive branch. We're happy to light a torch.
Here's the thing, pick up on this again. If everybody's focused, and I know it makes news, that's why we're all in this room and standing here. Cancel the contract. Big deal, obviously. It's a massive deal for the state. But don't lose sight of the other side and the other issue. And that's why the summit's critical, because it's the first step. We need a solution to congestion, guys. This starts the dialogue. If we stop and only cancel and all of us go away, I tell you right now, I will work to have everyone, including myself, I won't run, and these people should be have opposition and lose. Because our responsibility is to find a solid, workable solution for congestion, short-term and long-term. No perfect answers, but I will tell you, this contract, like many things, and I say it, I've said it in the Senate chamber, I've said it on the committee, I've said it locally, it's been printed, I will say it again. There's an endless supply of stupid in state government. This demonstrates it. Our responsibility is when we find it, eliminate it, and at least not add to it.
And I will say one thing, one of the material changes that I think is relevant is what happened in the Charlotte City Council race, which I think probably doesn't resonate as much with the Charlotte City Council voter as it did with me and some others. This project was considered to be the first of several managed lane projects. The reason why this project goes south of exit 20, excuse me, was because of the connectivity into Highway 74, 485, and all these other things. Mayor-elect Roberts and the City Council of Charlotte had made it very clear that they are going to oppose managed lane projects in their district at all costs. So therefore, it makes no sense for us to pay for, in essence, what would be from mile marker 20.3 to exit 11, 9 miles of managed lane project, which is a significant portion of the overall cost of the project, to connect to nothing. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things here that have changed materially that have to be addressed. And those are the type of things that I think the summit has to look at.
Joe, can you go back over on the STR? Are you hoping to get it evaluated in 16 and then voted on in 17?
I'm hoping it'll be part of P4, which would obviously is the next ranking that would be.
What's the timing on that?
Well, I mean, we would like, I mean, if the initial list has been submitted, we'd ask for a special consideration to have our projects added to that list. My understanding in the time frame of P4 is it'll become public in January-ish of 2017, and then it'll get approved sometime in the late spring, early summer of 17 is the next time the STI rankings come out. Yes, sir.
I just want to say, as a local taxpayer, I appreciate all of you guys for stepping up and opposing the HOTs. That's an incredible move, and I really do appreciate all your work and effort towards this. The other thing is, we hadn't touched upon, just mentioned the D. Snyder, D. Gilroy's work, and I was just wondering if you could touch on that a little bit. My understanding, which is the simplified one, please complicate it as much as you can, is that
they'll do that.
Citrus basically violated the contract before they signed it.
I mean, I think.
Thanks, Mike, for the comments.
I think Ms. Gilroy's done some yeoman's work. I mean, she traveled to Spain. She's done a lot of research. She certainly has presented information.
Mike.
I am not a lawyer. I own a trucking company. You know, if you want to know how to get freight from Charlotte to Dallas, Texas, I'm your guy. In fact, if anybody needs something moved, let me know. You know, our goal is to make sure we facilitate those conversations with the NC DOT attorneys and let them make those determinations. We think there's real validity and material impact in what she's found. I don't want to get into discussing legal strategy or legal points here.
Okay, well, I just wanted to know if you had a position on the validity of her statement
you know, I don't know if any of us have the ability to assess that. That's really at whatever point that might be determined, where it's a BW Collier, it's a Beth Woods type issue for them to determine whether it's valid to move forward. That's the director of the SBI and our state auditor. They would need to determine whether that. I have no idea.
The flip side of that being that it appears that the state and Centro can manipulate and change the contract at will without regard to any regulations or protocol. So even if they did violate the contract and it was clear, what's to keep the state from being, oh, well, we forgive that, and by the way, we're going to give you $10 million for the annoyance of us?
I think what we're doing here today, there's a spotlight on it. that hasn't been on it previously, or at least a bigger spotlight on it that hadn't been there previously. I think the NC DOT would be take a long, hard look before they started making modifications to the contract at this point.
And I'll throw this one out, and this will get me in trouble by these guys, everybody else. But it'll be things that when we look at council and we say for cause, and why we say material breach, I think we even go back if we need to and look at the bidding process. Because as an example, I know for a fact, because of conversations I participated in, where it got close to the close, for the design close, the technical close, and the second bidder came because they did not have the ability to accrue the necessary equity to prove they had it secured in time for the bid. Centra had met that requirement according to NCDOT. As we all know, after the contract was signed, that contract had to be, the time frame extended because they did not have all the money secured. That seems very strange. So these red flags keep going up like that. Now, part of that explanation that I'd heard tangentially, so I don't know if it's true, was the TIFIA loans weren't secured, which would put it on DC and the state, not Centra. Might not have been their fault at all. But those are the kinds of things we need to understand and do a little digging into.
Thank you. To the point of the summit, we've all seen the attendee list. Let that list be expanded to include Jim and other people who, and Pat, and other people who have material information, including Dee and other individuals who have been involved in this, Mac Alpine, so that the scales are not necessarily tipped towards our side, but are at least weighted in that direction.
No, and I'll tell you why. In my conversation with the governor, we want to try to work within the existing decision-making model of how we decide road funding. So what we decided to do was, and this is in conjunction and consideration and agreement with the governor, is to make sure we invited all the CRTPO reps, since they are the governing body, if you will, when it comes to allocating road funding projects, or at least putting the rankings together and doing that work. We wanted to make sure we invited the state legislators. We wanted to make sure we invited the mayors, the new mayors-elect, to represent the municipalities. And we wanted to make sure we invited the top vote getter from the previous election in those municipalities. That was at the request of the governor. I've honored that request, and we are trying not to, just as we don't want the deck stacked one way or the other. Look, we don't believe this is an issue where we need to stack the deck one way or the other. What we need to do is get the responsible people in the room together and have a responsible conversation. And I have no intent to stack the deck. We went with a methodology of approach. Here's who we're going to invite based on this criteria. And once you start then picking and choosing beyond that, then I think you question the validity of the summit, and I think you question the validity of what we're actually trying to have an honest conversation. I will say this, the Lake Norman Chamber will be able to present as the NCDOT is going to present at that summit. So I think you will see some people that you have mentioned will be included from a presentation side. But the invitation list, as it is, will not change.
And just, to concur, the answer is no. And the reason being is recognize this is just the first meeting. This is the start of the conversation with enough of a group, since it is a contractual matter, that we understand what the next steps are, and which would be one of the takeaways at the end of that meeting. What do we do next? And that, down the road at the appropriate time, the audience can expand.
Regarding the summit, will the summit be open to the general public to listen and observe?
I'm not real sure how it couldn't be under state law. You got a CRTPO, you have multiple municipalities. I mean, I think that if you get into, you could, once you get into the specificity of a contract renegotiation discussion, I think that would fall outside the purview of open laws under North Carolina. I'm sure some of it will be closed based on that. But other than that, we don't have any intention or desire to close this off. There will not be a public hearing. We will not take questions from the press. The purpose of this summit, and there'll be not to say we won't do that in the future. There'll be plenty of time to do that. But the purpose of the summit is to let NCDOT and Lake Norman Chamber Group, which I'm using as a ubiquitous term to include a lot of different people other than just the Lake Norman Chamber, present both pros and cons of the project to the people who actually have to vote and make that decision. And that's the purpose of the summit, that's what I've agreed to with the governor, and that's what we hope to happen.
According to your timetable, this needs to happen next week?
My press release said it would happen within 10 business days. It will happen within 10 business days. I wish I could give you a definitive date. I'm waiting on that definitive date, as y'all are, but it will happen within 10 business days of my announcement.
So next week.
It will happen within 10 business days of my announcement.
Okay, beyond whatever happens with the summit, it sounds like you are determined to have a select committee look at this in December?
I believe that I believe that we're looking to put together a House Select Committee, and I think John Torbett will head that up, as he is our transportation guru in the House, and look at it and have a meeting up there in Raleigh as well with NC DOT and the folks here.
In December?
My request is that it will be as early in December as possible. But once again, I don't have a date. I'm not trying to be vague on dates. I just don't want to give you, I don't want to give anybody a false assumption that it's going to be Tuesday the 4th and it ended up being Wednesday the 5th and I get chastised for it.
Your transportation guru person was John Torbett?
John Torbett is the chairman of the Transportation Policy Committee, and he is also the one of the 4 chairmen of the Transportation Appropriations Committee in the House. And he's a great representative of the SPT. I think it goes somewhat back to what your question was about how are we doing back in Raleigh with our colleagues. The fact that I think our colleagues are willing to take these steps and go through and do these things are exactly, I think, the tangible difference that Representative Bradford so eloquently spoke of, and help educate those who don't live, breathe, and eat here, to steal somewhat of a line from Visit Lake Norman, and let them understand the true passion and concerns that our community has.
So at the conclusion of that, you would hope what would happen?
I try not to. I've been happily married for 15 years by trying not to guess what the outcomes of any of my actions are going to be. So, you know, certainly we hope that we have more supporters and we have more information that it maybe helps sway the governor, maybe helps sway legislators, and maybe bring new information to light that obviously we don't even know. So, you know, we're trying to do this in a process that will provide the greatest number of information with the best accurate information to all those involved so we can make educated decisions on behalf of our citizens.
Question?
As a community member, I'd just like to say to the media that it's important not to pit the community and our representatives against the governor. That should not be a headline. We want to work together.
Amen.
And we want the governor to hear us, and we want to work together. But I've been hearing some questions, and it made me feel uncomfortable because it was sounding like it was pitting you against the governor. And I don't see that. I see that you wanting to work with the governor, and I appreciate that.
Next November, I will be casting my vote for Pat McCrory for governor of the state of North Carolina, unequivocally.
And you know, I will say this, we truly believe that once the governor has all the information, he will agree with us. I mean, we want to work with the governor. He is our governor. We're proud of him. We're proud of the work he's done. He's done a lot of great things for the state.
The community
We think
wants
this
to
could
work
be
with
another
them.
great thing he could do for the state.
Which is the point of the letter. If we had not turned around the state budget, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. Be able to have it.
Following up on what she said, what do you think the political fallout is for the governor if he doesn't do what you're asking him to do?
Well, I tell you this.
You want to see the people that are standing up here?
What I found is there's these lovely yellow ads in one of the newspapers. And your kids come home and say, Daddy, why do people hate you? And, you know, and I don't say that lightly because, you know, it's tough. This has been a tough week for me. I had my 12-year-old daughter come home after reading the Huntersville Herald yesterday and ask me, why does people hate you, Dad? And I think that type of vitriolic language probably doesn't help us. I mean, I'm sure that some people say I wouldn't be here without it, and I would respectfully disagree, but I can't disprove a negative. We don't intend, or I certainly hope we don't intend to do any of that kind of stuff to the governor. I would hope that we would stop doing that stuff to ourselves. Circular firing squads very rarely get the desired results.
Oh boy.
But, you know, we want to work with the governor, and at the end of the day, I think if we're successful in educating him and his staff, I don't think it'll come to that.
He is the governor, he's won multiple elections, been the mayor, he's, I would think, relatively politically astute and can monitor and see what the results of the local elections were, and that sends a message to all of us. As Senator Tiller says, when we're casting our votes, he always says it's C cubed. So you first vote your conscience, then you vote your constituents, then you vote your caucus or the position of your group. This, for a lot of us, and for me particularly, is elevated to the level of it really is conscious. Regardless of what we do, it's the right thing. That's why as soon as we got the notice, why we started investigating the TRO and the need to stop this. At the same point, it's the constituents. This is people. I mean, you probably, if you'd followed Facebook at all, and I've actually, just so you know, officially, Twitter and Facebook, there's 2 gaps on my phone. For my campaign advice and my wife, I took it off. My wife, when I did, and I told her, she actually cried because she said I'd get her back, but only through Christmas. After that, it comes back on. So it's important when you look at that message that we're doing the right thing, because there was a note once, and I was being sarcastic, and sarcasm doesn't do very well on Facebook, that there's only a couple hundred people against this. Well, the idea is there aren't probably 200 votes to support tolling here, based on everybody, based on the knowledge we've learned to date. It's the vast majority. And I was at dinner last night, sushi at the lake, sitting by myself, taking my wife to the book club. She was going to book club. 2 neighbors walked in who are 2 very, very successful businessmen with their wives. They said, hey, you want to join us? So they sat down with me. And you've got somebody saying, you know, I don't know if I can support Pat again. Big donor, uber Republican. And I hear that message resound. So it does have implications, make no mistake, and we're not naive to that. But it's important that we represent people telling us what. And this one, candidly, pretty easy to support, because, you know, the vast, and I say vast majority, it's like 99.3% of people are not going to pass referendum supporting managed lanes.
So do you feel like Centra's decision to say that it's going to start on Monday was intentionally provocative?
Let me do this. Let me ask you that question.
I'm not answering
today. Of course. Absolutely. And I think, you know, I'm not an attorney, Charlie's not. But I mean, you know, being enough. I've negotiated multiple contracts professionally, hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts to negotiate the business intent. Don't let attorneys negotiate the business. Ask them, here's the intent. Let them craft the language to accomplish the intent when you go forward. As those that I've talked to and been around contracts, and we look to terminate, particularly for cause, you have to have damages to have any remuneration. I haven't looked at the contract in detail enough, but it would be interesting to know what provisions this may trigger by starting, and also to start creating damages and costs. And it's got to be the sense, at least as a lay perspective.
So have any of you talked to anyone with Centra or tried to talk to anyone with Centra?
I haven't.
I don't know if anybody, you know.
They didn't ask me when they negotiated the contract. I don't see a need to talk to them.
I have one question. I was at Huntersville Elementary School during the poll time, handing out candidate information. Jill Swain was there, and she was telling everyone, construction on the 77 toll lane starts in 10 days. How did she know something no one else knew?
I have the utmost respect for Jill Swain. She has served Huntersville for 16 years in a capacity that I think deserves respect. I don't know, I wasn't there, I didn't hear the comment. I will say this, if she knew it, when I talked to NC DOT 2 days ago, they didn't know it. You know, I don't want to get into he said, she said with Jill Swain, but I will say this, in my contacts with conversation with NC DOT 2 days ago, they were unaware of when I-77 Mobility Partners and Centra were prepared to make that announcement and start doing that as of Tuesday of this week.
Rita, and I haven't heard, I don't know if anybody else would have known or been made aware, but I do want to go officially on the record with the statement. Rita, you have the best cookies in the world.
Michelle.
Yes, the Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners has been instrumental in pushing this effort on behalf of the citizens. Will the top vote getter for the the board also be invited to the summit?
No, what we think we're gonna do there is invite Trevor Fuller, who's the chairman, and Jim Puckett, who is the district representative that holds this area. That's our expectation.
Is I-77 Mobility Partners a partnership between NC DOT and Centra?
I honestly don't know the answer to that, other than the fact that I can't imagine it would be. I believe I-77.
Then what is a P3 partnership?
I mean, a P3 partnership is if you and I decide to build a basketball court together. That doesn't mean we're the same company. And so, from that perspective, I think that no, I do not believe that I-77 Mobility Partners and DOT are in essence one company. Do they have a partnership agreement on a project? Certainly, but I don't think that makes them the same entity legally.
No.
And it'd be interesting to follow that tree of LLCs, where they go to holding companies, that whole bit, to really understand it.
I guess my question then is really still, no matter what, the announcement that came out yesterday, does that in any way, shape, or form indicate that the NC DOT is kind of a little bit, out there on its own, doing its own thing, not in control by the people of North Carolina?
I would believe that based on the fact that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cameras, every journalist in town, even Spanberg, that there are probably no decisions NC DOT is making on this project right now that don't come from the executive office.
With that, why don't we, I know we've been here a little over an hour, why don't we, if we have one last question, and then if you guys want to grab people individually, go for it.
I know one of the big issues, and I read a lot, but traffic studies. And to date, there's not really been a
TIA.
Yes. My recommend, I'm not allowed to be at the summit, but if I could make and take it for what it is, Interstate 40, where it connects to 77 all the way to 45, and we need on ramps, off ramps, road.
Yeah, one of the questions is, should we have a traffic impact analysis done for this project at some point? Charlie could probably address it from a technical perspective, transportation. I personally, one of the things I want to know is the top roads in a 15-mile contiguous stretch on 4-lane controlled access roads, what the worst ones in the state are. I'd love that piece of information.
Well, the other part of that is not done on a Friday. There's a lot of people, commuters, that work from home on Fridays, so Friday's not Monday through Thursday. You're going to get a much fewer number, particularly not a holiday like Veterans Day.
Well, that needs to be probably a 30-day window, so you can get an average across that as well. All right, and hopefully with the summit, we hope to have it finished. So when it completes, we've talked, we'd like to finish it right at 5 o'clock, so they could enjoy 77 getting home.